Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have an amazing show lined up. Our first guest is Zev Halpern, and he's here today to talk to us about how to recharge your marriage. Now, Zev has been a husband of over 35 years, father and contributing author to The Courage To. He's a TV show host and podcaster of The Raw Marriage Show and founder and president of Recharge Your Marriage Now. He's been a marriage counselor for over 21 years and relationship coach, speaker, and seminar facilitator. So let's welcome to the show, Zev.
Thanks so much, Marianne. Thanks for having me.
Oh, what a joy it is to have you here. Now, so you're the guy that recharges marriages and relationships. How did you get into this line of work?
Well, I was working in, I've been a psychotherapist for a long time, and I was specializing in some other things. And when I did corporate EAP program, I saw that a lot of issues were marriage and substance abuse. Some of them were even substance abuse and marriage. And I kind of liked it. I liked the challenge of two people versus the one-person psychotherapy. It's much more dynamic, much more exciting, never a dull moment.
I could imagine. And are you seeing like a pattern that people are coming to see you in regards to?
I see people, a variety of ages, and, different ages have different issues. Millennials and early marriages and then later marriages, they all have their unique qualities to them. I don't really see, the divorce rate is always not great. And people are struggling, even though I find people work hard to try to stay married. Some of them just don't have the skills because we're not really taught them, So.
Yeah. And I'm sure probably because of the maybe unresolved baggage that they bring to the marriage, maybe they don't know how to communicate very well, could be a factor as well.
It's a huge factor, and it's a factor that they don't learn until they really see it, kind of have an epiphany that, this is the baggage. This is the way it was like when I was growing up, or maybe this was like my father, or maybe this was something, like my mother. And, I'm doing the same thing, or I've unknowingly or enrolled somebody else to play out that scenario, and they play it out hard, like a play. Like a stage play, a production. So
they show up as the good actor to play that part, right?
they're the best actor to play that part. The problem is it's not always good for the other person or them.
Oh. So. Well, and that could be, I think, a kind of a challenging thing. And I know that you deal with these type of topics all the time on your hit TV show and podcast, The Raw Marriage Show.
Right.
So, yeah, you see it day in, day out.
I do. And, like I said, there's no issues with content problems. There's all kinds of content and all kinds of problems, just nuts and bolts, sexual, everything.
Well, and I did want to kind of touch a little bit more on the communication piece, because I think that can relate to people regardless where they're at. If you're married, you're dating, or single, it's kind of a huge piece. And most people I don't think they really pay attention to how important that is.
Because, at the beginning, they're not thinking, they are communicating. They're just so hot for each other. And they don't really see, they love talking to each other. All they want to do is hear their voice. They're locked in love till the smoke clears. And then they realize that perhaps, we have some communication issues that we used to not have. It happens in all different time periods, in different marriages according to the way. Whenever the smoke clears, though, people see a different thing. And
Well, and so what would be your advice if you're working with a couple and let's say their communication skills are really poor? They're very angry and all they do is yell at each other.
Yeah. Well, anger and yelling, I would tell them, is scary behavior. And, humans, when we get scared, we run. We don't get closer. We run to the furthest place we can, maybe hide under the bed, do whatever you can to get away. Who wants to deal with, somebody screaming and yelling at you? It invokes the flight-fright syndrome. People, that's a human quality. It's inherent in us. So the opposite of yelling and screaming is to be soothing, to give your spouse some soothing words, that help them, with their day, and especially in the few daily contacts that a lot of married people have. A lot of them are just yelling and complaining and annoyances instead of embellished points of contact where you can really, in 5 minutes, you can do amazing things for your marriage. You can hug, you can stroke each other nicely. You can remind each other why you chose the security of a marriage to begin with, because that's why couples, hook up anyway. It's for security, not for screaming and yelling. So I guess that comes as a big surprise to some people when it happens.
Yeah, I look back on my dating relationships and I don't see any that I would have signed up for yelling and screaming. There had been absolutely no way for that.
Thank you, but no thank you.
Yeah.
There's lots of other people you can enroll.
Oh, yeah.
I'm signing off.
Yeah. Well, and so let's say we have somebody that maybe they're not yelling and screaming, but they'd rather be right instead of being a supportive listener. Maybe you could expand on what a supportive listener is for our audience.
Right. I mean, the thing you said about being right, I mean, it's the truth. All of us like to be right. I do. Perhaps you do. But being right doesn't always make for happy relationships because it means that somebody's, wrong. And so I encourage them. First of all, some of them might be scared. They're scared to talk. Talking kicks up yelling. So why do it? So people stop talking. They just stop communicating. And I would say, you guys have to have a difficult conversation and let's have it here. You've probably had some at your house. Nobody's listening. But when somebody is witnessing it, a therapist, a coach, then it's real. It exists. And, for them to tell both of them, this problem exists. She has a problem with your communication. It's a fact. You can't ignore it. He has a problem with the way you go about, the business of asking whatever it is you ask. So let's agree that that's what's going on. And let's not worry about who's right. Let's try to figure out a way to say the things that make sense in the different countries, that you guys, married people, it's like they're from different lands and they speak different, I don't mean out of our country. I mean, they speak a different language. And so you have to find out what one thing means to somebody, another thing means to somebody else. And it can completely, I think also I find that people are really trying to say something. They just don't know how to say it. They're saying it the wrong way and it's not falling. It's not landing. It's doing the opposite.
It's interesting how much perception plays a part in all of just really intimate communication, because if we don't say things correctly or if, with like the right tone, or we're just not able to communicate it effectively, the perception can be one that we don't want to have, the opposite of what we're trying to convey, basically.
Yeah, you could say, I'm sick and tired of this place being so cluttered, whichever one is saying that. And the other one could take that as, oh my goodness, my marriage is ending. It's like, no, I didn't mean your marriage was ending. I meant that the thing is cluttered. So let's try to figure out. It doesn't fall on you, but let's try to figure this one out. Meaning and tone. Tone is really important. People don't realize, they don't recognize the tone they use sometimes when they get on the high horse. People don't like it. And it's not an incentive to talk.
No, in fact, the high horse, I mean, I had one and I had to retire it. So I get how that is.
And I think, there's one thing about talking and there's another thing about listening. Us humans have trouble listening, all of us. It's hard for us because we're thinking of the way we think about the situation through our own kind of rose-colored view and philosophy, and we're not seeing it the way the other person's seeing it, so that makes for difficult conversation.
Well, and from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of times when we do that as well, we're just seeing a situation or it could be a conflict or whatever the discussion is based upon our like our programming from birth, what it is that we know. And so that can really kind of narrow the discussion.
It's true. I mean, communication is a big, giant topic. And again, when people are fighting, the problem is the incentive to try to find a way to communicate effectively isn't there. So it doesn't happen. And it gets kind of worse as time goes on because people aren't talking. So the situation starts to get worse.
Well, and since we're on the discussion of conflict, what are some conflict resolution just like tips that our listeners can kind of put into play in their own relationships?
Well, when they see that their, spouse, I think they need to see what their conversation is doing to this other person, and sometimes they just don't. So they have to be told. A lot of times married couples, they need a little push. In certain directions. They get used to being in this lock. I mean, when you're in front of these two people, they're a very strong force. So to tell them something, it's like you're telling their process that their process is wrong and they react to it. So I try to just, lay back and let them know that, look, if it were going well, you wouldn't be here and we wouldn't be talking about this. So let's try to, find a way when things escalate to do things again back to the soothing, that soothe, that communicate what you really mean, and do things for your spouse that they really need as opposed to what you think they need. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of, oh, she needs that. No, she doesn't. But she has to tell him, I don't need that. And he has to tell her. And I encourage them, tell your spouse what you need. I mean, unless you're scared. And in some relationships, there's reason to be scared because people they get vicious and nasty. And the war of the roses, I mean.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Well, and when you see that, when you're helping people through difficult conversations or difficult relationships, what are some of the things that you see kind of like because gosh, you've been doing this for over 35 years. I mean, your stuff. What are some of the red flags that usually will appear?
Hurt. You see that this other person's extremely hurt and the other person doesn't realize it. And they've been hurt, and the other person just doesn't see that they're wounded, and they're wounded because this person that they love, is making the wound worse instead of helping, putting some nice antiseptic on it to make it feel better. And I think that is a big indicator that you can see it, the way they go at each other. Who gets the brunt of it. So,
yeah. Well, and I think because I know that you do weekends that are called Recharge Your Marriage, kind of couples coaching retreats and intensives. And so usually when people sign up for that, are they just kind of needing to, as it indicates, like recharge their marriage? Or is this also for people who might have their marriage kind of like teetering on the rocks?
Well, a lot of people who seek help, usually one person is a driving force when it's that second one where people's marriages are teetering on the rocks. And when it's far gone, it's hard to help them on a weekend. So I encourage, I look for people who come on weekends to, they can be teetering, but, not at the end, where they haven't done anything about it. And this is the first thing. Let's go to Zev's recharge weekend and, save this failed marriage with, other couples there. It's not the best thing in the world. And sometimes you have to take some people aside and say, it's important. You guys need some work. And, I'm not ashamed or, to tell them to do that in any way. You got to do that. You got to go and you got to sit with somebody who you trust, and you got to do a little work before this kind of thing will really help you. And, then we try to give them, what we can give them. But they're in a different place than some of the other couples who are really there because maybe their intimacy, has gone, to a different place, and they're looking for a way to reconnect, and they're looking for ideas, and they're looking for ways to, to get that thing going towards the hot part again, or at least sometimes,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, instead of once in a blue moon kind of deal, right?
Exactly, or never, or not at all.
Well, and so that kind of leads me to my next question. So what are some ways that our audience can improve the quality of their daily connection with their loved one?
So I think when I talk about embellishing contacts. Meaning, if you have this many contacts with everybody's working and you come home, maybe give a hug like you mean it. Maybe give a hug and make it last a little bit. Maybe run your hand down the person's arm and give them the message that, this is more than just, a hug. I not only do I care about you, I might want you, Mm-hmm. And, that does send a little message. I mean, if the person isn't, inclined to do that, at least the message is sent. I'm interested in you. I'm interested in this part of this marriage, and I like to see something happen. So it's good to send those messages. I mean, if you get dejected or rejected, I know that's hard, but you got to keep trying, and you got to keep sending that message. So you got to embellish those daily contacts. You can say nice things. You can help out. We were talking on the show the other day, about how far will vacuuming get you? Is there a correlation with vacuuming and the bedroom? There might be. There might. If it helps out, that if it's like the one thing, 100%. That will help out through the day and just make life a little easier, then you might get that reward you're looking for, not like a bone, but like a, wow, you actually responded to my need and you helped me, and it's something as simple as that. I want one of the guys on the show that was a guest said, I'm just going to go home and vacuum all day now. Okay. I said, get a good one. Get a good
I need to lock him up in my place. You kidding?
He said he's going to do every floor twice. It was funny. It was a funny moment, but it was a true moment because it's the truth. And they do correlate. Simple things, not the big things. Some people are looking for the little things. They're looking for support and help and security and recognition that somebody might be frustrated and just, have too much. The burden might be too heavy for them, that they're lifting. A lot of women's burdens are, they're way too heavy with the responsibility of, child rearing and how the whole thing. And that's a place where I hear a lot of that.
I'm sure that can get into a little bit of an overwhelm. And so when you're dealing with couples that are getting into that place, how you advise them to go ahead and do things like help your partner out with vacuuming or cook a meal or something, really probably just changes the whole dynamic between the two of them.
And I also tell them, I ask them to remember, to recapture their intimate memories, to take a look at the way things were. That it was the two of you back then that were holding, and that you didn't want to leave each other. All you want to do is hear each other talk. All you want to do was be with each other. All you want to do was, have sex, and more sex. And it's good to remember that because those are real memories. They live, in only their minds. and there was that place we might have done it, or these things, and it matters to hear those things, to get in touch with the fact that so many years later, or even a few years later, that when things are bad, that things were good back then, and that you can recapture that and kind of use your fantasy, to take you to a better place and reconnect, more than just, emotional intimacy and sexually.
Yeah. So for the people that come to you for coaching, do you kind of advise them to kind of schedule personal time? Do they create rituals? What do you advise them to do?
I'm glad you brought that up, because private rituals, are really important. They've been important to families, and only with the advent of a bunch of books now about happiness that have been written, they talked, very poignantly about how important having private rituals for your family, and for, between in a relationship that are special, that you both want to do, not necessarily like the date night, which maybe one of you, look, I know people, they have great times on date nights. Date nights, the point of it was novelty, to do something different. The problem is that sometimes the date night turns into the monotony of the marriage. They don't want to go on the date night, like I have to go on date night. I think I'd rather, walk into a train, or something. I've seen that. I've seen television, display that numerous times, and I've heard it out of the mouths of people. I just don't want to do, and the point of date night was novelty. Novelty is a real special sauce for marriages. If you can do things to manufacture novelty and anticipation, then you have a marriage that has a chance of being an exciting place, something you look forward to instead of something that you dread.
Yeah. Well, Dina, and I know what you're talking about, because I have friends that, in fact, I'm thinking of one friend, her husband hates cowboy music and dancing, and she loves line dancing. And so, every time he goes, it's, you could tell he's not having a good time. He'd rather be anywhere else, probably,
and so there's something, at some point, what's the point of him going?
Yeah.
At some point, someone needs to realize, like, okay, she needs a partner for line dancing, or do-si-do your partner or whatever. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't want to be do-si-doed. He want to be there. Find something. Find something that he likes. Excuse him from the thing that you like, because he doesn't like it. That's being very big. That's being very bold, to be able to do that, to say, I know you don't like it, so, may come once in a while, but not every time, because that's just going to create a scenario, where things, head games in the head, are going to go the wrong way.
Yeah, it just kind of causes further unhappiness. So, because I know sometimes they're like, well, I'm in a relationship, I should compromise, and do some of the things they like. But if it's really something that is that disdainful, then probably not, right?
Agreed. For sure. And you have to say something. And if you keep just doing it, just for the sake of the appeasement program doesn't work very well. It has a short life. And better to say, I really don't like that. Can we find something else to do? And when she or he says, yeah, why don't you find something else to do? Then, you have a task. You got to find something. And you got to put it on the calendar so that, so that it goes full circle. And you end up doing something else, and it fits into that novelty category instead of drudgery category.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe even show up with a few other options all ready to go, because then it kind of shows that you really kind of put some thought into it.
Absolutely. There's a lot of things that people, can do to enhance their, the monotony or drudgery that they might find themselves in. But it involves some creativity. Not everybody's so creative. But I asked them, what do you like? Come on, let's list them. And out of there, we find something, but first you really have to get deep with that one. Find out. And sometimes it comes as a surprise to the other person that they even like that stuff. And they find out something new, which they weren't going to find out if they didn't pursue it, or they didn't say anything about the fact that they don't like what's going on, or they can't stand going to that thing.
Yeah, the whole purpose is to have a happy marriage, not have one person happy, right?
Exactly. I mean, date night is it's supposed to be mutuality, and it's giving, but don't turn it into something that just is like rebound anger, because you're going to catch it. And in one way or the other, either silent anger or loud, there's silent rage. So,
yeah, kind of like a boomerang, it's coming back at you. So, well, and we've got a few more minutes here. I know that you have so much wonderful information in regards to getting your marriage back on track. What are some tips that you would like to leave our listeners?
Well, one is try to figure out what scenarios are going on in your marriage. Like if you went to a play and you saw a couple up on stage, and the play's purpose was to show you how these two people live. Whether they're secretive, whether they're outspoken, whatever it is. Try to find out like what's going on in your play. And recognize that you can change the play. You can write another script. The script doesn't have to stay the same. Look, they do a lot of that now. They change the plays. They write different endings. You're not stuck with what you have, but you need to understand what's being played out. And for sure, every couple is playing out some kind of scenario, one way or the other. It's a happy scenario, or it's an angry scenario, or it's frustrating, or it's something they experienced when they were little and you've been enrolled. So that's a really important thing to know. I mean, I think everybody would want to know that, but people don't think like that. They don't think like that. They think, hey, we're married, this is the way it is. Maybe you're not supposed to be happy. Maybe you're just, people even get that way. And I think that's I would tell them, don't get that way. You can find your happiness. You got to speak up. You have to, again, tell your spouse what you need, not wish that someday they will do the thing that you need, because it's not coming. There's no parachute. It's not, they're not sending in reinforcements until you open your mouth. And I think that is really important. But the one issue is the warning of, if it's scary to do that, don't do it. If you're going to, trip up some kind of anger storm, don't do it. Or if you fear for your safety, because some people do fear for their safety. That's why they don't kick up, the reality of their marriage, and they kind of just go on and they make do. Another thing I would say is that if you find that your spouse isn't responding in any way, shape, or form, then you have to look at yourself, and you have to kind of pull yourself up and say, you know what, I'm going to go out and do things, and I'm going to, develop some new interests, and I'm going to, and that's how people change. That's really how it happens. People take a class, people go to therapy, people do something, and all of a sudden somebody's changed a bit more than the other person. They're not the same person that the person married. They're better, and because they chose to not be unhappy. And sometimes that alone is enough to get the other person to respond. They go, hey, where is she? Where is he?
Where'd they go? Yeah.
I'm in front of the TV like a regular thing. What happened to spouse? Well, spouse got new interests. Spouse wants to develop, their life. They don't want a humdrum. And that goes a long way. When you do that, if you can do that, you can send a loud message, and it can have a tremendously positive effect on your marriage, because you're feeling better about you, instead of looking at, your spouse through angry eyes or resentful eyes or anything like that.
Yeah, because then you're focusing on your own happiness, and if the marriage, I'm just kind of guessing here, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't have this the skill set that you do, but if the marriage doesn't come together, then
then it doesn't.
Yeah,
and it doesn't, and you're in a better place. And people should be, but that involves taking responsibility for your own happiness, not just depending on that happiness, again, is going to come from a wish and a hope. Wish and a hope mean wish and a hope. They don't mean reality until they might happen. Dream might come true, but you got to give it a little push, meet it halfway, step out. In a positive way. I'm not encouraging people to step out of their marriages. I'm encouraging them to step up their game and, about the kind of person they want to be. And if they're not feeling like they can be the best they can be in this particular marriage, then they need to develop themselves. Sometimes it has a great effect on the marriage, and it kind of moves the other person where nothing else did. So.
Yeah, well, I guess if you keep doing the same thing, which is like nothing, then nothing changes.
Yeah, I mean, you go to the same thing. You're going to have the same drudgery or whatever it is that you're not liking. Yeah, until you step into it. You have to step into it.
Well, I can see why you recharge marriages, because you've got such great information, and I have no doubt that people really flock towards your weekend retreats that you do and your counseling. Now, do you work with people at a distance, or do they have to be within your geographical area?
I do both. I do face-to-face, and I do virtually, people all over the world. I set parameters, for coaching sessions, and, we do it. So you don't have to get in your car. You just have to, have two seats, in front of the camera, and let's get started, that kind of thing.
So. The willingness to do it, you move forward. So, well, Zev, Dr. Zev, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here today. Oh, and before I go, I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community? So,
rechargeyourmarriagenow.com, and on Facebook, Recharge Your Marriage, and on YouTube at .com Zev Halpern, where you can see all the Raw Marriage shows, and you can go to iTunes or iHeartRadio and hear the podcast. And I do Facebook Lives. I kind of a little off for the summer, but I usually do something called Over the Marriage Hump Wednesdays, and it's kind of it's always something. Facebook Live is a fun thing. I enjoy it, but I'm taking a little breather over the summer.
Well, I guess even top counselors and coaches like yourself need to take some time off every once in a while, right?
Absolutely, got to.
Well, Dr. Zev, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us today.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Marianne. Really, great interview.
Oh, well, thank you. It's been such a joy. We are going to pause here for a quick break, and we will be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 123 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
Ben Wexler is a gifted leadership development and strategy consultant for professionals who want to transform their organizations and careers. Through a uniquely personalized set of processes, participants discover their unique knowledge, how to leverage that knowledge and experience, and then put it all together with a global strategy. You're more valuable, your organization is more valuable, and the change is viral. Contact Ben at 630-881-1074. 630-881-1074.
This is Jennifer McGill. My highly anticipated new album, Unbreakable, is now available at jennifermcgill.com. Everything from power ballads to high-energy jam-out-in-your-car songs. I used my highest joys and deepest pains to create empowering songs of love, strength, healing, and restoration so that you can be unbreakable too. Get your copy of Unbreakable today from jennifermcgill.com. Because who doesn't want to be unbreakable?
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted to be introducing our next guest, Rocky Romanella, and he's here today to talk to us about his book, Tighten the Lug Nuts, The Principles of Balanced Leadership. So Rocky Romanella is an experienced executive, CEO, director, keynote speaker, trainer, and is the advisor and founder and principal of 360 Management Services. He most recently served as CEO and director of UniTek Global Services after retiring from a 36-year career with UPS. So Rocky is an expert in cultural integration, operations, engineering, and while in executive roles, Rocky successfully launched one of the largest rebranding initiatives in franchising history. So let's welcome to the show, Rocky.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to speaking with you and your audience.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, you are the person, the go-to person in regards to leadership. I mean, you've kind of been there, done that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying it that way. I think that leadership is one of those things that we all think about, have concerns about, but in many ways, all of us are leaders at some point in our life, and whether it's in a church group or whether it's, as a coach or mentor. So I think that leadership is that thing that is not just reserved for business individuals, but it really is about people who, take people into their care, mentor, work with, develop. And I think that, for example, in my mind, teachers are some of the greatest leaders.
Mm-hmm. No, without a doubt. Yeah. And what's interesting is the approach that you bring this, and I like how you talk about that leaders can be anybody, church group, people who are, in sports, what have you, because I do think a lot of times people kind of become laser focused and think books like these are only relatable when it comes into a business setting. And yet a lot of people in these groups that you just mentioned are kind of thrown into leadership positions with not really knowing how to navigate through that or even some of the dynamics. And so I think your book's a great fit for people looking to gain some clarity on that.
Well, thank you. Yes. When I wrote the book, Tighten the Lug Nuts, for me, it was all about legacy, and for me, legacy is that concept of you leave it a little better place than you found it. Are people better because of their time with you? Are your customers better because they did business with you, for example, if it was a business setting? And if you think about that concept of legacy, did you leave it a little better place, and are people better because of their time with you? that's why, for example, yeah, sure, it's obvious in business, but how about in those non-business settings like you and I were talking about, teachers? I mean, if you think about it, there are people who have no idea who their state senator is or their representative is. But if you ask them the question, who is that teacher that impacted you the most or made a difference in your life? And everybody stops, tilts their head, and, oh, it's Miss Farr in second grade. And Miss Farr, boy, she made all the difference for me. Or it was Mrs. So-and-so in fifth grade. And so everybody has that teacher who's made a difference in their life. And if you think about it from that perspective, that's legacy, that's leadership, that's the ability to make a difference in someone's life and give them that direction, give them that mentorship that I think it says so much about being a leader.
Well, and so you talk about balanced leadership. And for our listeners, what does that mean?
Well, so I think in everything you do, you need to have balance. And I think, unfortunately, we as individuals, get laser focused and in many ways become extremists on one way or another. So in business, for example, you could be the type of company that's going to focus in on your customers, and we're going to have the best customer service in the world. Well, that may be a great aspiration, but I'm sure that there are some customers that no matter what you do, you're never going to make happy, or you're going to just focus in on profitability. And I think when you do that, you end up, just pushing yourself in one direction. And for me, it's all about balance, that when you make your decisions, you make them in context of your three key constituents, your customers, your people, and your stakeholders or your share owners. And so whenever we would sit at a meeting and we were going to make a decision, I would ask the question, is the customer represented? Are we thinking like a customer? Do we understand what the customer's needs are? Do our people feel like valued individuals? What's the training we're going to give our people? Are they going to understand what role they play in the product and what the product's meant to do and how we serve that customer? And then the last question I would always ask, if you own this business 100%, would you make this decision? And that's acting like an owner. So it's think like a customer, feel like a valued individual, but act like an owner. And for me, if you can make decisions in that context, well, then all of a sudden you're starting to make much better decisions. And you see it all the time, whether it's in business and politics or just things at home or in the sports arena. We take care of one or two of those constituents, but we don't take care of all three of them. And then that gets us out of balance. And so student body left, student body right, or bouncing back and forth side to side is never a good place to go. And so I think balance is so important. And in that decision-making process, I talk about that balanced leadership, where you think like a customer, feel like a valued individual, and act like an owner. And if you think about it in the school setting, like you and I were just talking about, you can come up with a great, curriculum for the students. You can come up with some great courses, some great lesson plans, and then it's the right thing to do. But do we do a good job explaining it to the teachers who are going to execute on it? For example, if this was being built, in a different place at a higher level, for example. So I think that balance is so important.
Yeah. Well, I can agree with you more. And I think when people first get into business or into any kind of a leadership role, trying to understand what you do first is really kind of important. I think having a book like yours really gives them great guidance on how to move forward.
Well, thank you. And I think inside the book, we talk a lot about this concept of balanced leadership because, to your point, you're starting up as an entrepreneur. And entrepreneurs have really, I think, the ultimate, profit and loss or P&L responsibility, because when you think about it at night, if you think about it from a pure profit and loss or pure entrepreneurial perspective, you hit the cash register and the drawer opens. You pay your people, pay your customers. You pay your people, I should say, you pay your vendors. What's left is what you bring home. And that ability to manage that is so important. And if you stay too focused on just one thing, you're going to be out of balance, but then you may not make the best decision. So I think what the book tries to do is talk a little bit about balance. And then it does one other thing, I think, that ultimately leads to legacy. It's about simple acts of kindness. It's about being a good leader. I think it's important that, you understand that being a good person, having good values, good ethics, treating people with dignity and respect, having good integrity, all those things are so important in what makes up a good leader, right? It's not about the result of having, I have great, profit and loss results, or I have the most profitable business. Well, if you've alienated all your customers or nobody wants to work for you, I mean, that doesn't make you a great leader. What makes you a great leader or a great business is that, people want to do business with you. People want to work for you, and you make money. If you can do all three of those things, then you're really successful.
Well, and so that kind of leads me to my next question, because I think when we get into managing people and working with other people, it can be really tricky sometimes. We really want people to be part of a team and work together. What if we have a couple of employees, let's say a manager's having to deal with a couple of employees that are not willing to work together with the team or destructive to the team? What advice would you give those managers?
Well, first, I always tell people there are no secrets. So you cannot avoid having those difficult conversations with those individuals, because if you don't have those conversations, they're going to come home to roost at some point. And that's my point when I say there are no secrets. Everybody knows what everyone else is doing. And so if you don't address those individuals who are maybe off on their own island or doing it the way they want to do it or not participating in the group, vision and strategy, everybody notices that. And they look at you as a leader and say, well, are you going to address this? That's number one. Number two is there should be some value in being a good employee, right? We tend to deal with the least best people or the most help needed people or the people that are outside of the bounds. Well, what ends up happening then is all the good people never get the recognition they need. So sometimes you really need to address the good people and make the good people feel good about being good, right? There should be some value in being that good employee. And I think you have to understand your people, make sure you address all of their, talents, make sure you recognize the good things that they're all doing. And then the individuals that just are struggling with being part of that team, being part of the solution that we're all trying to gather, I think you have to have that difficult conversation. You have to be able to sit down with them and say, hey, look, I see that you're struggling here or you don't feel comfortable participating. We need your help here. We need you to be part of it. It's just not going to be acceptable for you to do what you want to do while the rest of us are doing this. I think if you don't address it, though, it causes bigger problems later on, not only with that individual, but with the collective group as a whole. And I think people just struggle with that difficult conversation, and you have to have it. It really frees you, and it frees the rest of the group up to be successful. And really, frankly, the individual who's not participating is probably not having too much fun themselves.
Yeah, it's just not a good situation going
no
for everybody. Yeah.
And it always comes home to roost. At some point, you're going to have that conversation. And if you let it go too long, if you do it early enough in the process, you may be able to save them in the sense of you can help them. Maybe they're just shy, or maybe they just don't have the confidence, and you can help them through that process a little bit, get them a couple of successes, make them feel good about being part of the team. If you let it go too long and they've alienated themselves, you may never be able to get them back in the fold. Well, that's a shame, because you could have saved a good employee or could have given lifeline to someone who really, could have turned out to be really a good member of the team. It's just you let it go too long, and now they just don't have a place to come back to.
Yeah. Well, and I'm so happy to be sharing your organization as well, because that's kind of what you do is you work with these companies that need either additional training or just kind of to refocus their vision.
Well, that's the best part. Our company, 360 Management Services, we have three legs of our stool. One leg is the keynote speaking and public speaking, of which I do. And I enjoy that immensely. And, do
I can tell because you're good at it.
Oh, thank you. Do a keynote speech. And then a lot of times what I really love to do is, after the keynote speech, maybe do a breakout session or two where there's more, kind of finite learning and finite, education that can happen. So I think that to me is kind of best case scenario. I love that part of it. And then we do leadership training. I'm also working with Seton Hall University here in New Jersey, and I've been working with them on a continuing education program. Teaches them class on why values matter. Another class we teach is Obsessed with the Front Line. How do you get your frontline management team to, really kind of understand their roles and responsibility? And frankly, if you think about it, that frontline group is really your brand. They interact the closest with your people and your customers. And so I think that whole concept of being obsessed with your frontline management team and how to make them better, gain success and feel good about themselves is such an important part of your success as an organization. And we do day and a half leadership training. And so that's the second leg of our stool. And the third leg of our product stool is we do process improvement, process management. It will be more of a consulting kind of situation, but it's more on the process side. How do you improve your processes? How do you hit the targets you're looking for and support your vision, your strategy as an organization? But in all three, I think the key is we're working with people, and we love working with people and seeing if we can get the light bulb to go off inside of organizations to where their people can feel like they can live out the strategy, live out the values, live out the culture of the organization. So it's always, at the end of the day, it's always about your people. People execute on behalf of your organization, and the degree to which you get everyone in your organization to understand their roles and responsibility, that's really the strength of your organization. So no matter how much technology there is, it's still an individual who's going to execute your brand. And so the ability to touch them is so important inside an organization.
I think I'm glad that you touched on the fact that you guys do CE programs. So if you have companies who are looking to, if they're looking to expand their message in regards to like how you talked why values matter, I mean, it's great to have organizations like you that they can bring in and go ahead and take care of that kind of education and training.
Well, I think what's nice is that, it's needed. And secondly, what's really nice about it is that, all of us, and you take a look at our website, www.360managementservices.com, you look at all of us as instructors. I mean, I have 40 years of business experience. Bill, our team, Bill Klussman has 36. Ed Pike has, over 25 years of experience. And Nikki has 36 years. I mean, all of us have, years of experience with a lot of good stories to tell. And I think sometimes when you're in a workshop, especially a workshop with, with a management team with, young tenure, not a lot of business experience, they look for those experiences for you to relate to them. Hey, how did you handle this? Or what would happen if this happened? And it's nice to be able to say, hey, look, not everything worked out the way we wanted it to, but this is what we did. We stuck with it, or this is how we, took it from A to B to C to D. And how did you get there? And how do you handle difficult situations? How did you handle difficult employees? And yeah, they didn't always go the way we wanted, but we stuck with it, and our persistence overcame resistance. And then we've got to the point where that we either, gave that individual a chance to be successful in the organization, or it was time for them to move on. And frankly, they were happy to move on. I think that experience in those stories are so important in the lesson parts. So I think that's what I think our greatest value is that we bring, is that we have those years of experiences. We have a lot of great successes, but we had our failures. And to be frank with you, without failures, you don't really have the big successes.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, any big organization is going to have those because that's where you learn from. And if you don't have any types of failures, you haven't gone outside your bubble,
Well, you got to challenge yourself. I always say that, one of the biggest things you can do for your people is challenge them to not stop at the first right answer. In fact, in writing the book, as you know, I wrote the book in this third person, Joe Scafone, and the narrative is from this individual I coined, Joe Scafone. And over my years of business, I kind of breathed some life into Joe, because I never liked sitting in a meeting and someone would bring forth an idea or a thought, and I would say, or I didn't like when people would say, oh, I don't know if that's a great idea. Maybe you got to look at it differently. I felt like you stifled creativity. And so Joe Scafone became this person I would say to someone, well, that's not a bad idea, but what do you think Joe would think? You think Joe would think that's a good idea? And we would kind of laugh. But it helped soften that, maybe go constructive criticism of, maybe got to go back and take another look at it. Or better yet, don't stop at the first right answer. And Joe Scafone was a person that kind of challenged you not to stop at the first right answer. Hey, this first right answer may be a right answer, but what if you went a little bit deeper? What if you went a little bit farther? If you push through your comfort zone, you may find an even better answer, or more importantly, you may find an answer that fits today but can work 12 months from now, 18 months, 2 years from now, or has a growth opportunity in it because you went past the obvious answer. So this concept of not stopping at the first right answer and challenging yourself to look past that first right answer is so important as a leader to get your people to look past that first right answer and to accept only their best. And I think Joe helped me do that, and it certainly helped when I wrote the book to write it as third person, because I never felt like I think you should do this, or I never liked that feeling. So I always felt like, so Joe allowed me to do that. And over the years, people would come into a meeting and say, hey, I covered this with Joe already. Joe thinks it's a good idea. So, that's good. Let me hear it, and I'll let you know if I think it's good too, but I'm glad you and Joe are on the same page.
Like, Joe told me I get a raise, and so I'm waiting for it to be processed.
Yeah, I got a note here from Joe. Okay, that's good, but let's talk about it. So, and it was a good way to write the book for me, too. So it kept it fun, it kept it lighthearted, but, it was a way to, to put the lessons down on paper and some of the experiences. So it was a good way to do it.
I think it offers a lot of, it allows people to have a little bit more leeway when it comes to, working with Joe, because they can go ahead and be a little bit more adventurous because of, because Joe's a fictitious individual,
Yeah. Well, and you sometimes think if you disagree with your boss, is he or she going to be upset with me for doing it? And you want them. Look, you want people there's a way to challenge in a polite, professional way. And I think as long as you're doing it in the right way, in the right setting, in the right content, that's healthy. That's not disrespectful or being insubordinate. It's the opposite. You want to challenge yourself and your people to be the best that you can be and they can be. And that happens with healthy dialogue and respectful disagreement. And I think that, to your point, Joe allows that to happen for me, at least, where, hey, Joe, I think Joe's wrong on this. I think this is the way we should be approaching it. And it's not them saying to you as their boss, maybe or leader, hey, I disagree with you. I think you're not looking at this right. I remember one person saying to me, I think Joe's got to look at this thing differently. Maybe Joe's got to take a step back and look at it differently. And I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, you know what? I think you're right. Joe's got to take a step back and think about it. But the best part was nobody felt awkward. Nobody felt like, wow, I think I just put myself in a bad spot on my career. And that's not what you never want that to happen, because, and even if there was an inappropriate, then or maybe you were just too forceful in your disagreement and that wasn't the right spot. You know what? There's a time and place. Sometimes you have to do it publicly because you got to tell people we don't accept that behavior, especially if you use the wrong word or something like that. But if it's not that bad a situation, then you wait till the appropriate time, bring them in your office and say, look, I really appreciate your disagreement. I want you to know you can always disagree, but there's a time and a place. And, it's awkward when you're challenging me in front of the group. And so while I'm okay with you disagreeing, once you start moving your disagreement to being disagreeable, that's where that's where the line's got to be drawn. But that aside, look, you can always feel like you can disagree. You can always feel like you got a better way or better approach. Sometimes maybe the best thing to do is end the conversation, come in, close the door and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you. I think we got to look at this a different way. So I think there's always a good way to do it. And sometimes people don't know what that line is. So that's a teaching moment at that point.
Of course. In fact, most people, they bring their own baggage with them. So, either they could be a little bit, overly aggressive or whatever the case is, and they just don't have the information to understand how to approach people or how to approach their managers or what's appropriate. So, teaching them just serves everybody, because next time then they're coming to you and saying, hey, can I have a moment, and shut the door and talk,
Right. That's exactly right. And let's face it, at least I believe this. Look, we're not born with being natural leaders. And I think what happens is that you have some abilities and some things, that tendencies potentially maybe. But at the end of the day, somebody's mentored you. Somebody's put their arm around you. I mean, I went to college to be a high school history teacher and a baseball coach. I mean, it was, I didn't go to college to I think I want to be a president of one of UPS's division and a CEO of a company someday. I just wanted to be the best I could be. And I changed my major from teaching to management. I got a part-time job at UPS. I was paying my way through college. And so as I was a part-time supervisor inside UPS, I started to think to myself, well, look, if I'm really a good leader, it's just being a good teacher. I mean, the ability to touch your people and get them to see what we're trying to accomplish and what role they play is how I view teaching, right? Can I get the light bulbs that go off in my classroom? Can people really see things and connect dots, and can I help them do those things? And to me, being a supervisor and a manager was really being a good teacher. So things to me start with being a teacher. To me, that's the core. That everything starts with your ability to touch people, get them to see the vision. And so I changed my major to management. So, And then from that point forward, my dad, rest his soul, when I told him I got the job at UPS, told me a couple of things that stuck with me forever. The first thing he said to me was, learn your job and then learn some more. And then the second thing he said to me was, whatever they ask you to do, say yes and then thank you. So, UPS had this promotion from within policy. And so as I was growing and developing there, and they were offering opportunities, they'd say, hey, we got an opportunity for you in Chicago. Would you be willing to take this responsibility? I could always hear my dad back up saying, yes and thank you. I'd say, yeah, sure, if you think I'm the right person for the job. And so we moved across the country with UPS. And I think that was some of the greatest advice, from a humble, genuine person like my dad, who just said, hey, learn your job and learn some more. And then, whatever they ask you to do, say yes and thank you. And so I think it starts with that, with the honesty of purpose, that you really just want to be the best that you can be, and you want to learn as much as you can and try to make yourself and your family proud. And then the rest of it starts to take care of itself, I believe.
Yeah. Well, you definitely have the right approach, Rocky. I mean, just listening to you talk about how to handle conflict and empower people, I mean, it's where I think companies and corporations wish to be, and I could see why they probably are beating down your door to work with you, without a doubt. What are some of the biggest reasons that you're seeing corporations and companies come to you for in regards to if they need to do any kind of training or anything with that with their employees? What's like the number one reason?
Well, it's interesting. So what happens is, unfortunately, is in difficult economic times or in tough times or downturns or whatever, everyone does the famous, you sit there with your CFO and everybody sits there and they start to, where do we save money? All right, so we'll look at T&E, travel and entertainment. We'll look at cost-cutting kinds of things. We'll look at supplies. And then, unfortunately, I think many companies make the decision that, what, maybe we have to forego some training and maybe we won't be sending our new supervisors to training or orientation. If you think about onboarding in today's companies, you used to have, these onboarding processes where you sat there, you learned about the company culture, the history. Well, today, you may do your own onboarding. You'll get you'll go online, you'll look at a video, and so what happens is so that's where some of the, reductions and the right sizing happens. But then companies realize, wait a second, it is about our people. They're going to execute our product. They're going to execute our brand. They're our brand ambassadors. And so we get these calls from companies all the time. Hey, can you put together a training workshop? Can you take a look at our onboarding? It's what you learn first, you retain the longest. And so we really got to make a better first impression with our people as we bring them on board, or our leadership team at the front line really needs to be able to impact our business, but we've kind of stepped away from that. So I think that really becomes the place where we really feel good about ourselves, and we serve the companies we work with the best, because we come in there and we can impact their management team and we can really help them become, very effective, very efficient, quickly. And I think that they see results themselves. They feel good about themselves as leaders because they're having successful impacts, and the company sees it and says, you know what? Maybe it was short-sighted, but we had to have our reduction. We had to be able to, get the business going back from a profitability point of view. But the place to cut is never your people. I know it's short-term, but boy, it's your people that execute your brand. They represent your brand, and so much, is done by your people that you really need to make sure that you have processes in place to help them to be successful. So that's really where we get, the most of our activity. And then on the keynote speaking side, obviously I enjoy that motivational speaking kind of thing where you challenge the audience to think about, your people, think about, your products and services, to the people in your care really have a good, clear understanding of what role they play and how they execute on behalf of your customer, your company, I should say, to your customers.
Well, and I think also with the large millennial workforce that we have, it's so important for companies to engage with them from the get-go. I think the onboarding process is actually more important than ever because they are really kind of redefining in some ways how the workplace is. And if companies don't get ahead of that, they end up having to basically they're losing people and then having to do the retraining process, which is just, not cost effective.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, and I think you absolutely have articulated and hit the nail on the head, because the cost of turnover is so high today. I mean, if you think about the process, you have a company that's doing the recruiting for you, and they're doing the first round of interviews, and then someone else doing the interview, and then you onboard them. That whole process could take you 4, 6, 8 weeks, 2, 3 months, depending on the type of company you have. And then there's a training process, and then there's, kind of the fumbling around of learning what role I play and how I can make an impact in the business. And before you know it, you have 6 months under your belt, and now there's a disconnect still. I don't feel like I'm part of an organization. You don't really feel like I'm part of your organization. Then I leave. Now you're back to the same 6 months. And if you think about it, that role and responsibility, you may not have filled effectively for a whole year.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we're counting
ends up being a huge drain.
Well, yeah, yes, absolutely. Meanwhile, we're counting pencils. We're wanting to know whether you spent more than $25 on a meal. We want to know that, could you have parked in a long-term parking lot and spent $15 for overnight instead of $20? I mean, we're going through all those numbers. Meanwhile, we're turning people over at literally $30,000, $40,000 in turnover costs. But that we're not going to address. But we're going to address the fact, hey, did you really need a mechanical pencil? Couldn't you just sharpen a number 2? I mean, really?
It is a little short-sighted when it comes to that kind of just in regards to their onboarding altogether. And I think companies are starting to get the memo on that. Because they're looking at it going, we can't keep millennial staff for nothing.
Right.
And for them, it's really important about culture, about making an impact. It can't be just like I'm coming here and making a widget, and then leaving. It has to be more to that.
Well, it's interesting too, because I'm a fan, and maybe because I have 4 kids and they're in that age, but see, I'm a fan of the millennials. I think that when you look at kind of generationally, I think my generation was the generation, if you ask the question, does UPS need Rocky Romanella, or does Rocky Romanella need UPS? Well, I would have answered the question, no, I need UPS, right? Because that's how we were brought up, right? The next generation is like, no, UPS needs us. We're bright. We got it all going together. The millennials are, wait a second, let's talk about this. I think it's a little bit of both. I think we need each other. So they're very inquisitive. They ask good questions. They want to connect dots, right? So they want to know, how do I fit into this? Where when UPS said to me, hey, we got a job for you in California, are you interested? Of course, my dad said yes and thank you. Millennials just say, wait a second, yeah, I'm interested. How's this going to affect my career? Is there opportunity for me down the road? What are you going to be asking me to do? Well, they're not challenging you. They're asking you. That's a good thing. And so to your point, but by not onboarding them properly or not having the right training for them, there's a disconnect. They're like, well, wait a second. Am I going to fit in here? Because I want to understand what role I'm going to play. I want to understand, how this is all going to work together. I want to connect the dots in my mind. I think they're more prepared than my generation and the generation after that. I think they're more prepared because, they're great with technology. They ask good questions. They find things quickly and effectively. But I think sometimes we view them as challenging. Well, you're asking me questions. Quit asking questions. Go do your job. It doesn't work that way. You know what I mean? They're not asking you a question to challenge your authority. They're asking you the question so that they can understand how to connect the dots. Yeah. And I think that's that's what you have to do, is make sure you address that in a way through communication, through the training, through the onboarding, to make them say, like, hey, you know what? I'm with a good company. I got this. It makes good sense to me. I can see how it all fits together. I'm in. I want to be part of this.
Yeah, and I would agree with you on that. I think the millennials it's just such a great generation, and they're really they're making companies make changes. In regards to, maybe they have virtual staff now, people who do a little bit of work at home and a little bit at the office. And it's really kind of redefining the workplace in some ways. And the companies that get it are just booming. And the ones that don't, need to hire you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Well, and, I know we touched on your book, a little bit. I didn't want to give a whole lot of that away. I feel like people need to go pick up their copy, and companies need to hire you to come in and do some training and be their keynote speaker, and then buy one of these books for each of their employees to give to them so that they can start getting on the right path as far as, you know, how to work together as a team and what leadership looks like for everyone.
Well, I appreciate that. And you know, it's funny. It's really started to go in that direction, and I absolutely love it personally. I mean, we have a couple. I mean, I've been signed up for some speaking engagements, and in fact, we just are doing one in September now that they bought 400 books, and I'm excited about, you know, doing a couple of training classes along with the keynote. But what I like the best is signing the book, you know, because I feel like it's that personal touch. You know, I like to go to the opening of their conferences so that people see you. I don't ever want people to feel like, oh, I rolled in with my overnight bag, did my 45 minutes, half hour, you know, an hour speech and then left. No, I want to be part of the group. I want them to feel like they know who I am and I know a little bit more about them. So I think it's taking that time. To me, that's a respect thing. I mean, we learned that at UPS. I was a driver at UPS, and our promotion from within policy allowed us to do the jobs. I know when I was at UPS and we purchased mailboxes, et cetera, and then we rebranded it later on to the UPS store, that was a direct report responsibility to me. One of the first things I did was go work a day in the store. And because I felt like even though I wouldn't learn everything that in one day, I wanted to show the franchisee the respect of trying to learn their job, understanding what they do, and giving them the respect that I wouldn't just show up and start barking off orders, that I would take the time to learn their job and try to at least be respectful, understand what happens in the POS system, and you know what are the products and services, and how do they deal with their customers. And so that respect to me means so much. And that same happens in the speaking engagements where you get in there, you learn, you try to understand what the conference is all about, what you're trying to accomplish, you know, relate to the people inside the audience, I think means a lot.
Well, and I would agree with you. I think it builds that community, and obviously you are excellent at being able to communicate a way that people can learn new information and use that to accelerate not just their business, but also their lives. Let's be on the right track as far as how we want to conduct business, live life, and I think it makes a big difference all the way around. You know, Rocky, I could talk to you for, quite some time because you are just, you really are the go-to person as far as leadership is concerned. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
So our website is www.3, and then the word 60, SIXTY, managementservices.com. And we have an interactive site, and I get quite a few emails. And I love when people send me an email, hey, I've got this situation going on. Any thoughts? I love that. And so feel free to interact with us there. You can actually purchase the book online from us there at our website, also at Barnes & Noble online, as well as Amazon. Amazon's great with the books. I mean, they get them quickly. In fact, the 400 books we just ordered for the speaking engagement only took a few days, and they have them already. So Amazon's been great online with the books. So you can reach us there. We're on Twitter, Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. So that's a good way to have dialogue with us and communicate with us. And I read my own emails, and so if you certainly have any emails or any questions that you have, I'd love to feel free to email me, and I'll get back with you. As well as you can also request a speaker that way through our website, and can sign me up for one of your speaking or training opportunities.
Yeah, I highly advise that. I mean, I've worked in the business sphere, both in corporate and as an entrepreneur for years, and you are right on the button as far as building and moving people in the right direction with team, with their leadership, and also with culture. So, Rocky, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And if you ever want to do it again, count me in. And if you ever want to do one where maybe people send you in some questions, and you and I can answer those questions if you'd like, and that would certainly, I'm open to that as well. I mean, anytime where you can help somebody or someone in a particular situation they're in, or a setting that they need to, maybe need some help with. If you and I can help them, why not? Let's have some fun, help them out.
Hey, I'm all for that. I mean, this has been way too much fun, so we'll definitely do it again.
Well, we are at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to tune in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.